Welcome to episode 1 of design work in Fusion 360. Today, as promised, we are going to walk through the design of this patio furniture foot, and I'm going to do it from scratch for you guys. I apologize for the background printer noise. There's nothing to be done about that. If it's bad, we'll figure it out in the future. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna walk through the design in Fusion 360 of this foot that turned out like this. Ours might turn out a little bit more accurate even now that I've done this once and I'm starting over. So the first thing that you're gonna need is a good set of calipers. These calipers are not horribly expensive. These were, I think, like $30 Amazon calipers that I've had for coming up on 6 years now. They're great. I've had to replace the batteries twice, I think. They're fantastic. So you'll definitely need calipers. What we're going to do, anytime we start with a design, because we're working in Fusion 360, we have to start with a sketch. So we have to figure out what face we're going to start by designing. I'm going to start with this nice flat lip here because it's going to be easier to measure. And then we can extrude this down this direction. And then we can extrude this lip up this direction, add this lip to it, this chamfer here on the top edge. And then we can add our nubs. We can cut this center into it. We can cut the slot out of it. And then we will round our bottom edges here at the very end because that's what we're going to do. We always leave rounding our edges or chamfering our edges until the very last step when possible because it makes modifying them in between if we need to much easier. So we're going to start with a measurement of our longest point. In this case, that's going to come out to 41.2-ish. I always try to keep things fairly simple, and if there's an option between overshooting or undershooting, we're always going to undershoot because the plastic is going to expand just a little bit. So while this says 41.25, we're going to go with 41.2 because that is what I know to be accurate. We're going to start with creating a midpoint line because this is not a it's not a standard circle or a standard rectangle, so we're going to have to create it as an ellipse and go from there. So then what we need our second measurement for the height of that is going to be 18.8. We're going to do another midpoint line here from the center that is 18.8. And then what we're going to do is we're going to create our ellipse, and we're going to, any tool that we use, if you hover over it as a tooltip, it'll pop up what it is and how to use it. So the ellipse, it's going to create an ellipse defined by a center point, a major axis, and one point on the ellipse. So we have to start with the center point and then select our outside corner point and then our mid corner point. I know it's a circular shape, there's no corners, but you get the idea. So just like that. We started with center, edge, middle. So now we have our basic shape. What we're going to do is we're going to extrude that. I'm going to extrude that the height of this. Now this can be kind of tricky to measure because that bottom edge is round. So what we can do is we can actually use the depth portion of our calipers, and we can set this on a table, which you guys aren't going to be able to see, but we're going to set it on a table and then go until it hits the table, and that gives us 12.1. So we're just going to extrude it down by 12 millimeters. That's going to give us this bottom portion here. Now what we have to do is we have to create this inside lip here and extrude that up is the next step. So we're going to create a sketch from our top surface of our ellipse. We're going to cheat a little bit. We're going to use an offset. So instead of me drawing this shape again, what we're going to do is we're just going to use the existing geometry of this one, and we're going to find out how far in this is. Now, technically, this only works if it's a universal distance in. So we'll notice on my recreation part, this is an even spacing here and an even spacing here. That's probably technically not correct. So we're gonna walk that back, and we're going to not use an offset. We're going to create new measurements and create a new ellipse inside of this current ellipse. So we know that our outside edge of that is 41.2. You guys can't really see that. 41.2-ish, 41.3. Again, it's not going to super matter because this isn't what holds the foot in. It's this actual nub. So we're going to go 41.3 for our midpoint line. That's weird. It's exactly the same as our sometimes we got to go back and check measurements because I put in the wrong measurement the first time. That is clearly not 41.2. It's 44.4. This is why I like Fusion 360 though, is because I can go back and change a measurement. So long as we're here, we might as well double check our first measurement, make sure that it is in fact 18. Yeah, I've got 18.8 there. That's still accurate. Okay. Then when we go here and we do our midpoint line, we're going to do, it was 41.3, I believe. So we're going to go 41.2 just to kind of bring it in just a little bit. So we can see that we've got our midpoint line of 41.2. And then we need our height of our thing, which is going to be 18.6, give or take. We're going to create a new midpoint line that is 18.6. That's not right. Ah, that's actually 22. Got 22.9. We're just going to go to 23. See, we got it wrong twice. So this is why we triple check things. 18.6 is correct-ish here. It's probably closer to 18.8, but we're going to worry about that with the nubs. We're not going to do that here. So then we're going to do another ellipse or ellipse, center point, end point, point in the middle. And we'll note that that is a little closer to the edge on the sides than it is the top and the bottom, which is what we expected to see because that's what's in the original. So then we're going to do our wall thickness. We are going to create an offset here because I'm not drawing another one of these. And that comes out to, that wall thickness is right about 3 millimeters. So we're just going to use 3 millimeters. We're going to go -3. That's going to create a matching shape on the inside by 3 millimeters because our wall has to have thickness before we can extrude it. So then we're going to finish our sketch and we're going to extrude this. Now, notably, the inside of this hole is deeper than the outside here. What we're doing is because we're extruding from the outside edge up, we have to measure that distance. So we're going to take our depth tool. We're going to slide it along that edge until it touches there. And then we're going to look at 9.5. So we're just going to go 9.4. 9.4, I said. All right. So now we have our really basic shape. It's starting to come together a little bit. So what we have to do is we have to chamfer that top edge because we know that there's a chamfer on that top edge, and we want to add that before we do our nubs because they might not play nicely with one another. So we got to be a little tricky there. So what we're going to do is we're going to use our chamfer tool, and by default it's set up to distance and angle. So we need to change that to, oh no, it's already set up for distance and angle, so we don't have to worry about it as much. We're going to adjust both the distance and the angle so that we get a nice gradual chamfer. And this is one of those spots where I'm gonna play with my numbers numerically so that I can get a more precise fitting, because when I drag that arrow in and out, it's going to jump by 0.5 millimeter each time. And I don't want to do that. I want it to jump, well, there would be your like 1 point, your 1/10 of a millimeter adjustment. So the tighter you're zoomed in, the more you get, the more granular control you get. We don't want the chamfer to go down that far. We only want it to go about yay far, which if we're eyeballing it, that's about right. That's probably as close as we need to get. And then from here, now we have a much better shape than arguably than what I had recreated the first time. So we're going to create a new sketch because our next feature that we need is we need these nubs here on the outside edge, because these are going to be what create that tension fit. So we're going to create a sketch on that top surface again. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure that nub, and I think it looks fairly circular. So we're just going to use a regular circle there instead of trying to draw fancy ellipsy or anything. So that looks like about a 5 millimeter circle, but it only has a depth of 1.3 millimeters. So we are going to have to do the ellipsy thing again. So we're going to create another midpoint line somewhere along the outside edge of this. This isn't going to it shouldn't matter a whole lot. If we look really closely, it's going to kind of snap to the tangent arc of the circle, which is kind of sort of what we want. We want a 5 millimeter circle, but we only want the depth of this thing to be 1.3 millimeters. That doesn't seem... It seems like it's coming out an awful long ways, but so we can see. We can kind of double check if we measure from the outside edge to the point there. On my model there, I have 1.6, and on my drawing here, I only have 0.5. What that tells me is that that nub starts quite a bit further in, if it will let me move it. Kind of like that. So now if we do that measurement, we should end up with that still only says 0.6. So something is wrong here. This is why we kind of double check while we're going. So something is wrong. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm just going to bring that nub in a little bit and hope that that is right-ish. So we're going to bring that from 1.3 to like 0.8. And we're going to just deal with that. And then we have to draw yet another ellipse. So we're going to do end point. Nope, we have to start with center point. We did that. Center point, end point, mark along the thing. Now we're going to zoom in and we're going to kind of adjust that end point so that it's a little bit more even with the other side, just a little bit. Yeah, that looks about right. And something still doesn't seem right about that nub, but we're going to just chalk that up to it doesn't look right on the screen, and we're not going to second guess ourselves too much. Yeah, right there. And then what we're going to do, rather than drawing the same point on 4 spots and hoping for the best, we're going to take and we're going to do, I think I have to extrude it first before I can do a pattern along path. So we're going to finish this first. We're going to extrude both sides up so that it always intersects with the wall, even when we pass the chamfer point. And we're going to bring it up. Oh, it's got little slivers here that are unhighlighted. There we go. And we're going to bring it up to a height of 6 millimeters. And then it's going to default to cut. We're going to change that to join. And then we're going to make sure that it highlights everything. That little sliver in the middle is a problem. There we go. And then we're going to hit join. And then we're going to go ahead and chamfer that top bit in there just a little bit. Apparently that's all I'm allowed to do is that little bit there. I should be able to do more than that. That's going to be a problem. Distance and angle. There we go. That should be a little better. May have to get creative about how we fix that, but we'll worry about that in a second. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take our create tool, we're going to pattern along a path, and we're going to select features. So we're going to select the extrude and the chamfer that we just created, and we're going to set this along this path. Then what we have to do is we have to tell it how many we want and how we want it to follow the path. So we're going to follow the path in the path direction, not the identical direction. We're going to set the number of objects. Here it's going to default to 3. We want 4 of those nubs. And then we're going to just drag that arrow until we get to the point where we kind of sort of like that. And if we want to look at it and kind of see symmetrically, we can look at the top-down view specifically and get a better idea of how things are lined up. That looks pretty good to me, so we're just going to go ahead and run that. Okay, it's shaping up pretty well. Now we're going to do this little cut and then round the bottom out, and then we'll double check our overall height and make sure that we don't have to shrink anything down. We're actually going to do that before we mess with the bottom. So first things first, we got to add that little rectangular cut. We're going to do a sketch along the top edge. We're going to do a center rectangle. We're just going to, this is where I'm starting to get a little tired and bored of this project. So we're going to take some shortcuts. We're just going to set the the width of that to 3 millimeters and call it a day. So if we set that to 3 millimeters, the length of it isn't going to matter because we're going to select which faces we cut here in a moment. So we're going to finish that sketch, and then we're going to extrude. Basically, those two things that intersect there, we're going to bring those down. Rather than bring them down a specific distance, we're going to just send them to that top surface, and then we're going to send them just a little bit further, because if we look really closely, that notch goes down into that surface just a little bit. So we're going to find the depth of how far that goes in. That goes in another 1.4 millimeters. So if I do an offset here of minus 1.4, it's going to go to the surface we selected and then 1.4 millimeters further. We hit OK, and then we have the correct cut. Now what we're going to do is we're going to measure top to bottom, and that comes out at 21.4. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to measure this, and it comes out to 20.2. So we need to make this that's 1.2 millimeters shorter, and we're just going to take that off of the flat edge on the bottom. I don't know where the measurement gets wrong, but something isn't quite right, so we're just going to make it a little bit shorter and call it a day. We could have gone back to the original extrusion and changed that height. We can do it either way. Anything you do in Fusion 360, there's multiple ways to do it. So last thing we need to do, actually, is this surface on the inside, this guy here, is technically a little bit deeper than this outside edge. It's probably not important, but anytime we're doing a replica like this, it's better to copy the original part than it is to make judgment calls on our own. So the outside edge is 9.8 millimeters to the surface, which is going to be the same as what we've got here, but the inside is 15.4, and we can see that if we click this line inside, we can see 9.4. So if we go from 9.4 to 15.4, now we got to do a little bit of math. Luckily, it's easy math. We're going to do another 6 millimeters deep. We're going to go minus 6. Now we should have the same distance inside. Technically, this little loop here is a different face. If we really wanted to clean that up, we would delete it. I don't care. Now what we've got to do is we've got to shape the bottom of this so that it matches this curve. Now this gets a little tricky because we can't just grab this outside edge and chamfer it or fillet it in, because it is all one edge. So what we have to do is we're going to create a sketch from the mid plane of the thing. We're going to draw this profile, and then we're going to extrude it all the way across, and then we're going to do one last little fillet to get this little bit around out here on the edge, and then we'll be done. So we're going to create a sketch, and we're going to create a sketch from the middle of our object. Now importantly here, Fusion 360 doesn't see any of the geometry that we currently have, so we have to tell it what geometry we want to look for. So we have to use our project tool. The shortcut for that is P. That's what I just did. Or you can go to create, project, and include. And you can use, here you can use either the project or the intersect feature. I prefer the project tool because it works a little bit cleaner for most things. So we're just going to project that. Now what we have to do is we have to decide how we want to draw this arch so that it matches on both sides. So this arc here along the bottom edge is hopefully a fairly simple shape. So what we're going to do, we're just going to measure down to where that arc stops, more or less. And then we're going to draw a reference line down to that point, and we're going to use that as our arc tool. So from the top, we're going to go down by 5 millimeters. And then on the bottom, we're going to come out from the middle, that middle surface that is cut down right there. That is 6.5 5 millimeters. So if we did half of that, we would be at 3.25 or 3.2. So we're just going to go 3.2 millimeters out. And then we're going to draw an arc for those 2 points. So we're going to do a 3-point arc. We're going to do the top, the bottom, and a point in between. That snaps nicely to the tangent. So we might just use that. And then, unfortunately, this is still an open face, so we have to use an additional line to connect that to the bottom. And now when we hide our body, we should be able to highlight that particular arc. Now what we're going to do, rather than doing all that again, we're just going to mirror that across the center. We're going to do a mirror of these two things. We're going to mirror it across the center origin plane like that. And then we should have two things that we can use to modify the shape. And that should be good. So we're going to finish that sketch, and then we're going to extrude that and that. We're going to go symmetrically, and we're just going to drag that arrow. Again, we're at the point in this project where I don't care about being super precise. So we're just going to drag it so that it cuts it all the way across. We're going to hit OK. It is going to leave these little slivers because it's technically an ellipse. We can just click the inside face of that and hit delete. It's going to remove those. There's probably technically a better way to do that, but it's me we're talking about, so we're going to do it the way I know how. Then we're going to grab our fillet tool. We're going to grab both of those outside edges that are currently flat and we want to be a little bit round. So then we're just going to drag those up so they're a little bit round, and we're going to hit OK. So now the last couple steps, this is getting long, so we're going to rush through this maybe a little bit. So the last couple steps that we have is we need to save the project and export it. I'm not going to bother with saving it here because I've already done this once. Actually, we're going to do it because it belongs in a different space now. So we're going to put this in our class projects folder, and we're going to create a new folder for video tutorial. Into patio furniture. Oops. The reason we save it before we export it is because if we don't save it, it will export as untitled, and it becomes really, really easy to just export a bunch of untitled projects to your downloads. We don't want to do that because then it's going to be a lot harder to find later. So we name it first and then export it. In the eventuality that you're lazy enough to not put it in a folder when you export it, at the very least, it'll be named in your downloads. So we go to File, Export. Again, I'm just going to save it to downloads because I only need this project like once or twice, and then we'll be done with it. We're going to export that. It already exists because I named my previous one the same thing. And then we're going to open up our Orca Slicer, and it looks like I need a new tab for my Orca Slicer. So we're going to open up a new tab. Never mind all my other tabs. You guys probably won't have that. If you guys want to see more like this, excellent. If you have any criticisms or things that you would like to see, maybe things that I skipped over, let me know. I'm just going to splice this with my screen capture stuff and put it up as my first YouTube video. I apologize for it being half an hour long. That's just going to be what it is. If you want it shorter, speed it up. Okay, so we're in our slicer. Oh, I'm in my slicer. There you go. Now you can see my slicer. We're going to select the correct printer, the correct material, the correct settings. Then we're going to import our object and orient it and send it to the printer. At that point, we're done. So we're going to make sure we have the correct printer. I have a whole list. You probably won't have a whole list. So we're going to go Centauri Carbon because that's where I have PCTG loaded. I happen to know that it is on my printer with an IP address of 126. Again, that might not change for you guys. You might have it named or whatever. This is just my workflow. We know that we are going to use PCTG. I know that I probably want a 0.16 millimeter layer height. Just want it a little bit cleaner because we've got some round surfaces, so we don't want as much stepping as a 0.2 millimeter layer height is going to give us. We're going to import our object. Any way you do this is fine. You can open it from File Explorer, whatever. It's not important. Now, this probably has two ways we could print it. We could probably print it upright like this, and it would probably be fine. We could throw some supports underneath. I don't want to do it that way because removing tiny supports is really tricky, and sometimes they don't form up properly, and sometimes they fuse to the bottom of the project. I don't want that because the thing that's going to be visible after these are installed is the bottom of the foot. So I want that surface to be as clean as possible. So what I'm going to do is, because this has a nice flat edge, I'm going to flip it over and I'm going to put supports on the inside. So we're going to lay on face. We're going to flip it over. We're going to supports. This is one of the weird times that I'm going to use normal grid supports rather than tree supports because we have nice flat surfaces to support. We're going to put it on build plate only. And then I'm going to set my first layer object gap to 0.5 rather than 0.2 because I don't want the bottom of the project to fuse with the bottom of the supports. I want there to be more of a gap there. And we're going to do the same thing on the inside as well because it doesn't matter as much. And then for funsies, we'll turn on the don't support bridges. And then we'll slice it, see what it looks like, and then we'll duplicate it. So this actually did a really cool thing where it didn't support the inside of the project because it's all bridges, which is kind of actually ideal for what we want. So I don't need to be removing supports from that. The inside surface doesn't matter. This is excellent. Excellent. And then we've got a little bit of a gap between the bottom of our object and the first bit of support, which is what we want. That'll make it easier to remove later. So now we're ready to duplicate that. The hotkey in Orca Slicer is Control K. We're going to, now the customer only wants 3 of these. I'm going to do a handful more than that because I know how quick they print and the customer will be more happy with having extras. And if one of these has broken or gotten lost, more of them will break and get lost over time. And it's just an above and beyond thing that we can do without affecting bottom line profit margins, any of that stuff. Number of copies here, we're going to do 5 copies. We're going to do a total of 6. That's going to auto arrange those on the build plate. After we're done with it, we're going to hit slice. And that's it. End of video. If you guys want to see more of these, every little bit you can do, share this to your friend who's struggling with Fusion 360. Tell them we've got more content coming soon. I'm going to do my best to try to make this approachable. We're going to make it applicable. So anytime I get a custom order, unless the customer says, hey, I don't want this project shared, I'm just going to do this for every one of them. Because coming in early and sharing this information is really, truly what I'm about. And I want you guys to have the best experience possible with your 3D printer. So with that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. I'm going to do we're all learning here, right? So I don't have any experience video editing. So I'm going to spend some time on this to see if I can't clean some stuff up and cut some stuff out that's extra. I tried my damnedest not to include anything, but sorry it's so long. We're going to get it trimmed down in the future.